All right, good evening and welcome to the March 21st board meeting. Please join me in a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will begin this evening with the report of the superintendent, Dr. Byrne.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our March 21st Board of Education meeting. Spring has officially sprung as of yesterday at 5:24 p.m. Given that it's still below freezing in the mornings, here's hoping Mother Nature sits up and takes notice soon. It was a beautiful day today, seeing lots of our student athletes out on fields in the sun. It was a wonderful sight. Although a not so wonderful sight was my 2-week look-ahead forecast where I saw snow twice on the forecast. But I'm pretty optimistic that it won't stick and cause any problems. It is National Drug and Alcohol Facts Week, and RIACT will be giving away these water bottles that say show up for your friends, show up for yourself, tomorrow at the middle school and high school. And there'll be some communication coming out and announcements of some joint events with the coalition from Harrison in the coming days. So thank you to those members of the community who joined us this past Saturday for our annual Community Budget Cafe right here in the middle school multipurpose room. Thank you also to the board members who were able to join us, Jane Anderson, Jen Boyle, and Chris Repetto, and to the administrators, principals, assistant principals, and directors who took time out of their Saturday mornings to ensure the community feels informed about the 2023-2024 school district budget. And at tonight's meeting, we will hopefully, the board will officially adopt the budget, so it goes from being a recommended to an adopted budget. And from that point, the road show will begin. I will be out and about in the community in the coming weeks sharing the details of the budget with various groups. We've got a few engagements lined up already, including the residents at the Osborne, the Chamber of Commerce, the RIREC Seniors Group, the Lions Club, the Rotary Clubs, and of course, all 5 of the school's PO and PTO meetings. And we're looking for more engagements. So if there's a group out there interested in having us, please let us know. As a reminder, this Friday, March 24th, is our 4th and final Superintendent's Conference Day of the school year. Students will not be in school, but the faculty and staff will be hard at work. The morning sessions are dedicated to critical thinking, the science of reading, social emotional learning, and technology. In fact, Caitlin is probably very nervous about this, and Tricia is definitely making sure I'm prepared. I am actually doing a session on ChatGPT and the impact on schools and the possibilities. So I've been learning a tremendous amount about AI, and just another thing to keep me up at night as I think of all the possible paths we can go down with this. And the afternoon will provide work for departmental and grade level based work and planning. The week of April 3rd through 7th is the district's spring recess. Schools are closed all week and offices are open Monday through Wednesday from 8:30 to 2:30 and closed on Thursday and Friday. I am hopeful that we'll soon be able to announce that we're able to give back the day of Monday, April 10th as one of our unused snow emergency days. We're going to keep a close eye on the weather forecast and make that decision in the next couple of weeks. And as we will not meet again until after the break, I hope everyone has a wonderful restorative spring recess. And that concludes my report for this evening.
All right, thank you, Dr. Byrne. I, for one, will be keeping my fingers and toes crossed and my spoon not under my pillow so that we do, in fact, get April the 10th off. So we'll see what happens. We will move to our first presentation and discussion on the budget adoption. Dr. Byrne.
Okay, thank you very much. So over the last few months, we've talked a lot about the budget. We've talked about the state of the schools. We've heard from individual departments, from our assistant superintendents and directors about their work this year and their plans for next year. And so tonight we'll take a shorter view through all of that, just to wrap up the budget conversations to this point for budget adoption. And as we always do, we begin with the RIDE commitment. And as you've heard, and I hope has been really clearly illustrated throughout the process, is that our work across all areas, from curriculum to PPS and special education to technology, facilities, athletics, it is all in support of the RIDE commitment, helping our kids become strong critical thinkers, supporting our staff with effective professional learning, and being transparent and open and communicating with the community. So just to go back to our wonderful Valentine's meeting, where we had presented the budget, and then I gave a State of the Schools presentation to sort of lead into those more detailed conversations. What are the things that we've been focusing on, and where do we see ourselves heading with the support of this budget? So what you don't see in this budget is lots of increases in positions and things like that, because we are really focused in a lot of key areas. Just to show again, mathematics, we are moving that great work we've been doing in mathematics at the elementary level into 6th grade with the implementation of Math in Focus. So that prep work that Tricia and Joe and Christy and the team have been doing will continue as we implement the program in the middle school. We are further implementing the units of study in writing in 6th through 8th grade. Handwriting, I know there are lots of people that love when we talk about handwriting, but we have a committee that is focused on adoption of a handwriting program for kindergarten through 2nd grade. And I know our literacy committee has done some really good study and investigation into word study. So there'll be implementation of new word study materials at the elementary level. We will continue that really important work around the science of reading, and it's really supporting all learners in their phonological development, but also really being able to effectively support our students with language-based learning disabilities through general education and special education through that incredibly valuable partnership with the Haskins Lab that will continue. In fact, I believe Devin is here tomorrow for the full day working with our data teams on the data-based intervention model and the science of reading work. At the secondary level, our science teachers have been really focused on redesigning courses in implementing the next generation science standards. We have really begun in earnest to look at how do we further develop our science research program to make that a pathway for more children at the high school level. What you see in some places, and we've looked at other successful science research programs and said, what is it about the programs? And frankly, the two places that have what we believe are the strongest models right now are Ossining High School and Byram Hills High School. What is it that you need to appeal to the students in the school that would be most interested in really focusing on science research in their high school program? It's dedicated staff, it's a dedicated space, and a commitment to really building out that program. So we've already begun the process in conversations with our team in the science department and curriculum office to begin that work and make that transition. Our world language teachers have been focused on creating new courses and writing new curriculum for the FLES program at the elementary level and the 6 through 12 world language courses, implementing critical thinking across those courses. The continued work of integrated co-teaching and improving that model across all levels of the system, as well as implementing data-based intervention models across the spectrum in the schools. Our continued work with assessment and progress monitoring from the Universal Screener, which is the NWEA, the DBI model, our MTSS processes. I know there were presentations and work done at the schools this week in their faculty meetings on the MTSS process and the protocols, and we're really excited about that. The additional pathways that we are in the exploration stage, but very excited about, looking carefully at IB as a potential pathway to implement in the high school for kids that may be interested. That's on our agenda to begin that process in earnest now that we're out of COVID and we could visit those places that offer IB in a pathway model in their schools. And I know Trish has been meeting with the visual and performing arts team, really looking at the process and building the process for looking at our visual and performing arts pathway and what that would look like. So we're really excited about that work, and this budget helps us to support that work and begin those processes. Next slide, please. We're going to continue. We've been working on building out more curriculum maps in terms of our communication and the work that we're doing. And as I've talked about a few times, and Caitlin has talked about, our new website and our new website vendor in Finalsite. And that work, Caitlin and Colleen and their team they've been working all year on preparing all of the content for the website. And we're pretty excited that by the fall, we'll be fully launched with our new Finalsite website. So that's very exciting. On the facilities end, there's that continued work in safety and security and the Salto locks and all of those projects that are in place. And we will, as you know, be coming back in June for some more information and the next steps in the phases 3 and 3A of the capital project. And as we think about, and I know the SEL committee is working now, there's been some, you had your first meeting and there was a lot of excitement around the SEL conversation. The committee that's looking at all of our SEL efforts and our wellness efforts across the district, and then continuing to build those mental health supports. While we are still not there yet with our satellite mental health clinic with WJCS, what is a positive on that is once the state finally gives the stamp of approval, it's 12 months from when it launches. So it's not like it was a program that was just going to be for this school year. And again, just thank you to the county and particularly to Catherine Parker, one of our parents and a county legislator, who secured funding to help make that happen. And the space is ready and we are ready, and Aaron and I have been communicating with WJCS. And once the New York State Office of Mental Health approves the program, we will be ready to go. We will continue our relationship with the extra mental health support with ESS across the buildings. And we're just really excited about the doubling down of the efforts across so many areas that this budget will enable us to do. Of course, there are always internal and external influences that we've talked about. The new standards, the next generation science standards, the next generation ELA and math standards, the outcomes of the New York State Blue Ribbon Commission and what the graduation measures will be, they're still unknown. As you recall, I'm participating on that Blue Ribbon Commission, and our task is to make a recommendation to the Board of Regents by the fall. That I think I have a meeting. It's in the next 2 or 3 days for the next Blue Ribbon Commission meeting. And our internal influences that impact any kind of changes in planning, our curriculum review cycle, as well as meeting the needs of the community and hearing ideas from the community and then bringing them to the Curriculum Council through the curriculum development process. And what, frankly, our data tells us. Okay. So just to recap, as we presented earlier, our current budget that was approved for the 22-23 school year is $99,477,734. Our budget-to-budget increase is 4.44%, which is a tax cap compliant budget, which we'll get to. But the tax cap allows a 3.19%, so that's the tax cap plus any exclusions, and that translates to a 4.44% budget-to-budget increase for a proposed budget of $103,899,502. I will not go through all of the expenditures, but this slide has not changed since we began the budget process. As is typically the case, just under 78% of our budget is salaries and benefits. We are a people-centric organization. Schools, supporting kids is a human endeavor and requires lots of people to make that happen, so it makes total sense that the great majority of our budget rests in the salaries and benefits for our staff, and our wonderful staff at that. So if we look at what those notable increases are this year, as we've all felt in our own pocketbooks and our own budgets at home, the impact of inflation, we have seen benefits cost increases of just over $2 million. $1 million of that is just in the health benefits increases. So you've got the health benefits, you've got pension liabilities and things like that. It's just, it's frustrating when the cap allows for an increase and then so much of it is eaten away by things that are out of our control. I will say, on the health benefit side of things, I'm really pleased that we are a part of the Swiss CHIP health plan, because our increase was, it's shocking to say that we're lucky that it was only an 8% increase. Districts are either one of three places. They're either self-insured, which is a really scary thing. Districts who have been self-insured have run into major financial issues. They're part of the New York State plan, which is NYSHIP, which has had a 25% increase this year, or they're part of Swiss CHIP, which is a local consortium and a limited amount of school districts, and that's an 8% increase. So we're in a good place there. Our salaries from our contractual obligations, it's an increase of $1.1 million, and facilities, and much of that is where the inflationary impacts are increases of $870,000. So if we look at our revenue sources here, as we've talked about before, we are not a district that has the benefit of lots of financial support from New York State. So you can see that 89%, just over 89% of our budget comes from property taxes. Our state funding sources, it's a slight increase, a very slight increase overall of $26,000 from last year's. So it's a 0.84%. And it's just a reminder, we've heard about the fully funding of foundation aid, and there are school districts that are getting huge windfalls in foundation aid. We are not one of those places, as you can see, based on our state money. And this is, again, taking a little more from fund balance than we have in the past. Last year, it was $2.3 million, and our recommendation is for 2.7 of fund balance. So as you look at our recent budget increases, this year, the proposed budget, it's a 4.44% increase. Last year, it had been a 5.56%. And then we had a couple of years in the 2s and the 2.67. A big piece of that is the tax cap is actually at 2%, which it has not been for some time. So if you look at the tax levy increase, so that's with the property owners in Rye, it's a 3.19% increase. So the tax levy amount raised by taxes to support the budget will be $92.6 million. And that translates to taxable assessments anticipated for July 1 at $135,964,525. And that gets updated periodically, and we will update the community at that. And right now, that's an estimated tax rate per thousand of assessment at $681.40.43. As always, any questions, comments, feedback, thoughts, you can always email the board at rcsdboard@ryschools.org. Myself at byrne.eric@ryschools.org, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Gabby Peruccio, at peruccio.gabriella@ryschools.org, or if you can't remember any of those, feedback at ryschools.org. And just so tonight, should the board approve the budget and move forward with the adopted budget, The budget hearing will be held on May 2nd, and then the budget vote and trustee election would be on May 16th. So any questions, comments, thoughts?
Great, thank you. I would just start by making a comment. Over the last 4 meetings, we've had really detailed presentations and discussions and commentary related to the different facets of the budget. And so if anybody's just turning in for the first time, I think it would be really helpful for any members of the community to go back and to look at those meetings that we've had previously, because they have been so thoughtful and really informative, and really speak, I think, to the first few slides where you talk about the current and the future. And to that end, I would just say that while this budget is tax cap compliant, it is not a budget that allows the district to stand still. I think it is a budget that is very forward-thinking. I think it allows for continued growth from where we have been to where we are today, to where we are moving as a district. And I think while people may see it and think at the onset, right, the headlines, there's no new positions, no new programs, those kinds of things. When you really start to look into the folds of the budget, you see that it is that continued growth for our students and for our faculty and for our community. And I think it speaks to a seriousness of reflection within the administrative team about the direction of the district. And I think that is the most important thing that can be done through a budget, is to use it as an opportunity to think about the direction where a district should be going, where a district currently sits. And there are a lot of things that we have heard about over the years. Math in Focus would be one, right? And seeing that now, 6 years later, 5 years later, it's still happening and still growing, and the students and the teachers are still learning. Many times educators are accused of being of the moment, and that we flit from one thing to the next. And I think what this budget does through its thoughtfulness is really double down on the good practices, the good decision-making, the strategic thinking that has taken place over the culmination of 5 years and continues to move a district forward. And I find ourselves to be in a really wonderful position where we have been so thoughtful and reflective over the years that we can now just continue to grow for the benefit of all of those who are involved. And so I certainly am enthusiastic about the budget, and I look forward to the roadshows and the opportunities to talk with the community members about the good work and the really intentionality that this district is moving with. So thank you. And anyone else who has comments, please.
I would absolutely echo that, and I think it's important to also say that I really appreciated the roadmap that you presented to kick this off, because I think, Jane explained it really nicely, as did you, but there is so much intentionality and so much opportunity and so many ideas. And what I also appreciate about the budget is how it does balance sort of a fiscal responsibility to say we have a lot of things that we will be adding, and the district will continue to invest over time. And we appreciate that, with inflation and with other expenses, there's a lot we also have to balance. So being reasonable to grow in sort of a fiscally responsible manner for our community, members. So I appreciate both sides of that, being able to hold that balance.
Thank you.
Yeah, I won't go on for too long, because I agree with both Jane and Kelsey, and I think, there's been so much work that's been done over the last several years, and I think back to like special education for one, when we did our assessment, was that like 2018?
Yeah, 2018.
And all of those objectives that were highlighted in there of areas to assess and have progress in, that has been an intentional focus. And that's just one area, but that's one that I think that has made enormous strides for our district and our students and our professionals who work with those students throughout these last 5 years. And so to be able to have such a good foundation of programs in that area, as well as in math and mathematics and in literacy, to, just continue to move that work along, and how important that is. It doesn't maybe sound as flashy as we're adding this or that, but you can't get to the next steps up to where we want to go if we don't continue to progress all of those foundational pieces. So, and again, to Kelsey's point, I think it's also fiscally responsible, and that has been, if you look at those years of budgets, all of those budgets were tax cap compliant. Many factors played into the differences in those increases, but they were all tax cap compliant, and I think that is a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be very excited about and very proud of in where we've gotten to and what we're continuing to move forward. So thank you all for all of that work.
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments to, I think, what the path you're going down. When the tax cap came out many years ago, we had a structural gap in the budget. We were behind, and then we lost our ability to catch up. And to see how we've stayed so fiscally responsible over that period and covered that gap with only one override is remarkable. It's easy to approve the budget when we see everything that's in here, because it's the end of all the presentations you've been doing for 2 years now. All the things you say we're going to focus on, and here's what we're looking at. Then you see it show up in the budget either a year later or at the end of the year, and this is where the next piece is going. So it's actually a pleasure, and it's an easy to look at it and say this is where we're going, and all the comments you're hearing are a result of that. So thank you all for all that work.
Thank you.
And I'll just say one last comment. Thank you to all the presenters for the transparency. I think it's very nice. When I first joined the board, we didn't present like this, and I think it's great for not just the board members, but for the community to see what the major components are in such a well thought out, organized process. So I just wanted to say thank you. We really appreciate that.
Okay. With that, seeing no other comments, we will move on for the hearing of the public on non-agenda items. We welcome and encourage our community members to address the board at this time. Please come to the podium, state your name, address, and if you are representing an organization. To ensure everyone has the opportunity to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. I would ask the district clerk to set a timer for 3 minutes, so if you hear the timer, please wrap it up. The board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designed to be a discussion, so please understand that we may not respond to your comments or questions at this time. We take your comments seriously and may need more time to process and research an issue. We will ensure questions will be addressed by the appropriate staff member or possibly answered at a future board meeting. We will not entertain comments regarding individual students or district personnel, as these are protected under state and federal guidelines. Please know we take personnel concerns very seriously. On these matters, we would ask that you follow the appropriate administrative channels. As a reminder, the community may submit written comments at any time to the board by sending those to rcsdboard@rischools.org. Seeing no one here for public comment, we will move on to the consent agenda. Can I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Callie Erickson. Second, Jen Boyle. So we will begin to take a look at the consent agenda. Consent agenda general. Consent agenda fiscal. Consent agenda professional appointments. Consent agenda classified appointments. And consent agenda special education. Okay, seeing no questions, can we have a vote please on the consent agenda? All those in favor? That is 5-0 with 2 absences, so the consent agenda passes. On this evening's consent agenda, we have approved a consulting agreement for Focus on Our Music Instruction and Curriculum, which again speaks to the attention to the whole child. There is much evidence that supports that music instruction and education has a direct correlation to children's overall success in reading and writing and math. And I will say, I was speaking to somebody not all that long ago who was remarking on the education that their students are able to get through art and through music in the district. And in a time when many districts are cutting music and arts education, it's always great to see a commitment to music and art education here in the schools. The Rye Middle School PTO is donating $4,000 for a 6th grade field trip to medieval times. I will say it's not only a fun trip, but relevant, because there is indeed an instructional focus for 6th grade on the medieval period of time. And I know of one 6th grader who's quite excited for the field trip. The Milton PTO is generously donating $5,000 to support Magnum Recess, which, as we all know, I love to talk about, are big muscle movements. And so this yet again helps our kids get outside, learn to work and to be inclusive, and just burn off some steam and energy, which really helps them attend to task once they're back into the building. The Midland PTO is donating $13,000 to support teacher grants and field trip transportation. Again, helping to extend the curriculum outside of the classroom's 4 walls and to really give our kids a great enhancement of the instruction that they receive in school. The Midland PTO is also donating $10,000 for curriculum enrichment. So again, further extension of the curriculum. We have summer space rentals for the Wainwright House, which is a wonderful community partnership, and we talk about this sometimes, and I think it's so important for us to highlight when the district is able to work with other organizations inside and outside of our community, and this is a great relationship that I know Dr. Byrne has really worked to foster over the last few years. And it's a great way to highlight that learning for schools doesn't stop in the summer. Our administrators, our teachers, and us as Board of Education members will also be having the opportunity to learn over the summer. And finally, the big piece is that the board is officially adopting the 2023-2024 school budget. And as we stated earlier, we will be heading out on the road to speak with anyone and everyone who is excited to learn more about the school district's budget as we prepare for our budget vote on May 16th. And we also have one retirement and another previous retirement that we will talk about. So we are accepting the retirement of Linda Coyle. It is with sadness that I announce the retirement of longtime elementary school teacher Linda Coyle at the end of June after almost 30 years in the Rye City School District. Mrs. Coyle joined the Rye City School District in 1990 as a first grade teacher aide at Midland School. In 1991, she joined the faculty at Milton School as a second grade teacher and taught there for 10 years, moving to Midland School in 2001. At Midland, she taught second and third grades from 2001 until 2019, when she became a kindergarten teacher. Over the years, she served on the Milton Excellence team and served as the faculty club president. At Midland, she served as the level 2 grade leader for several years. Mrs. Coyle has a BA in Psychology Sociology from Skidmore College and her teacher certification from Central Connecticut State University. She began her teaching career as a substitute teacher in Newington, Connecticut elementary schools. Middle school principal Jim Boylan said of her, "Linda has been a devoted educator her entire career, the vast majority of which was spent in the Rye City School District. The calm and nurturing learning environment that Linda fostered for the hundreds of students she has taught has surely paid untold dividends, as those children have gone on to do great things." Linda has been a devoted colleague to so many teachers and staff members at Midland School. She is always willing to volunteer her time, expertise, and enthusiasm to better our school community. Linda will be dearly missed at Midland School, but we wish her a rewarding and relaxing retirement. In her retirement letter, Mrs. Coyle said, "I will miss my colleagues and the students I have taught a great deal. I will take with me the friendships I have made, the countless memories of my students, and the genuine pride I have from teaching in the Rye City Schools." We wish Mrs. Coyle all the best in her retirement. We also have a retirement that was previously approved, and we are here to speak to Dorothy Sorensen. It is with sadness that I announce the retirement of longtime Rye City School District clerical staff member Dorothy Sorensen. Mrs. Sorensen will retire at the end of June after 20 years working in the Rye City School District. She first joined the district in 2002 as the secretary to the principal at Rye High School. In 2013, she moved to the middle school to become a senior office assistant in the Rye Middle School Guidance Office. In 2022, she moved to the Central Administration Building to become an assistant to the Special Education Department. Mrs. Sorensen is a graduate of Greenwich High School. Prior to coming to Rye, she was a personal secretary and office manager at Hull & Company in Greenwich, office manager of Sound Shore Publications in Portchester, and executive assistant to the CEO and R.W. Grief & Co., LLC, in Stamford. Superintendent Dr. Burns said of her, "Dorothy has given many years of dedicated service to the students and families of Rye. She will be greatly missed." We wish Mrs. Sorensen all the best in her retirement. And now, moving on, we have information and discussion, policy, stadium lighting policy. Mrs. Boyle.
Thank you. So, for the members of the board who are going to open this up, who maybe have not looked at it in a while, there appears to be a lot of changes and removal, and just to give some background to this, actually, let me stop there. So there's two copies in here. One has all of the marked up changes to it. One is a cleaned up version so that it might be a little easier to read through so you can see what the actual language is. And it's just a little bit easier to read. To give a little background, last spring we had some community members come and speak to the board about wanting more access to the field for different non-RCSD sporting events. The board received feedback from those community members, as well as went back to speak to all of the neighbors around the field, who were also obviously stakeholders in whatever changes might be made to the policy. So we spent several months going through that. We also made revisions, made updates, got additional feedback, and in fact actually had a separate in-person meeting with a large group of the neighbors a few weeks ago. And what you see in front of you in the marked up copy is a reflection of what those changes included. We did receive some additional feedback just within the last 24 hours, because we distributed it out again to make sure that everyone had a chance to see it before we discussed it tonight. And some of those concerns I can outline for you as you're looking at the, I don't know if it's easier to look at the clean copy, probably. But look at the clean copy, and I can give you a sense of what some of those remaining concerns are. And we also have our athletic director here as well, Susan Reed-Dulay, in case there's any additional questions that we might want to talk through. She can give us any of the facts that we're looking for. So essentially, the idea around the updates to the policy were to streamline it a bit more. There was a lot of information in there that actually was no longer applicable to even how the athletic schedules worked. We also wanted to incorporate in there information about the potential use of the field by some of our youth organizations who are in need of field space in the early spring, March and April, because the grass fields typically are not usable, and unfortunately there are no other turf fields available within Rye for anyone to use. So what you will see here is, like I said, all of those original pieces of feedback that we got from the community members who were interested in that, as well as the neighbors. And the idea was to try to find as much of a compromise and common ground as we could around the use of the field. The most recent concerns or feedback that came in the last couple of hours, most of which were couched with a lot of appreciation for the sit-downs and talking through the different issues around the field. The first was related to weekend games. The way that we have the changes incorporated into the policy right now does not give a specific number of games that would potentially occur during those weekend hours, which are later. So the times for those could go as late as 10. I don't think they usually do, but they could go as late as 10. And so originally in the policy, it included a maximum number of weekend events that could occur. So one of the things that we could look at, and if you look at your marked up version, you'll see the original language, was the original number 4, which talked about a maximum of 14 lighted weekend games. So we could put an updated revised version of that back into the policy to address that. It would not, and Susan chime in at any moment, would not impact the number of games we expect. In fact, it would probably be more than we would need. But again, most of the time, we're just trying to make sure that we're going to be able to accommodate and be as transparent as possible about what might be happening on the field.
That's correct. You'll see a number of 70 for a weekday, and we probably are lucky if we hit half of that. I used a good analogy that this spring, I believe it was 12, if I'm not mistaken, games that were potential lighted games, and that's usually on the high end. Donna does a great job, my administrative assistant, of looking at when sundown is throughout each week and each month, and calculates that to come up with the night games. So we try to be on the higher side, more conservative, so we won't hit that. And on the weekends as well, we primarily use weekend games in the fall, not so much this spring, so we'll be fine.
And while we certainly appreciate the concerns of the neighbors, there's no reason not to include that original section that speaks to the 14 lighted weekend games. So when we go back to policy, before it comes back to the board, that will be our recommendation, is to put that back in. It has no negative impact, and we feel that if it gives comfort to the neighbors, then we should absolutely have that in.
Right. And those would be, I think the way that it was, the concern was raised, that is that those 14 are part of the 70. It's not like an additional 14
Right.
on top of the 70. So that would be a piece that we'd want to make sure is clear.
But even if it were, we're still not making the 70, so
No.
you're still underneath. So it's
Exactly.
still, but just,
I think,
yeah.
I think it's really just in an effort to make sure that it's very clear as to what we're talking about.
And the 70 wasn't games, that's
practices
practices,
and
lighted
games.
practices and games across the whole year.
Right.
So,
Exactly. There was also a concern raised about during the week, the end time of any games that we might have at 8:30 with that 30-minute buffer post 8:30 in the event that a game was to go over into overtime, or as Susan has mentioned, in the fall, which had not always been an issue, but in the fall, we experienced a lot of teams having to push games later because of transportation issues. So, again, I think the goal of this would be for them to be off as soon as the game is over, which it might be most often by 8:30 or 8:45 at the latest. But given that the transportation issues are not predictable, we want to be as transparent and forthcoming that there could be a rare event that could happen, and wouldn't want to move it to 8 and then be like, oh, sorry, the team was late, and now we have, so it's really just trying to be as transparent as possible, knowing that that's not going to be the regular practice.
Yeah, it's not the plan, but it's just an
Right.
emergency plan. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's the
In
fallback.
case,
Right.
In case-
right.
One other area that was actually sort of comical because everybody was like, why is it in here? It's was related to the PA. Because it's a field life policy, but also talks about the PA system. Essentially, it's the request was to just make sure that it was very clear that the public address system is not to be used for non-Rice City School District games. It's not even used during practices. It's not, even accessible, except for some of the few home games that we
Right.
have the public address system for.
So that's a simple one, just in that
In that
item
line.
is including that the PA system will only be allowed for use for Rise City School District games.
Yeah.
So do we need to change the title to Stadium, Lighting, and PA Policy?
That is the only mention of the PA system, but we could
It's the only
consider
PA
it.
policy, yeah, I'm just,
We could consider it.
And
Why does it have to make-
just the other thing, too, that was clear, because it was also a big issue related to the PA address system, was the music. There's no music to be played out of the speaker system. The national anthem, the announcements, that was a particular concern over my 3 years. I've heard quite a bit. So there would be nothing coming out of the speakers.
Right, and that's clarified.
And that's in there, and that was a
policy.
big thing.
Yes.
And a question about that, is that the way it's always been? Is that so this
It's-
is not a change in that we used to have music for warm-up?
Correct. It
So
was
it's always
supposed to
been
be that way.
Okay, so we're just clarifying it and
Yep.
putting it in here, okay.
Now, I will clarify that students sometimes will have a small speaker on the field, which is completely different than booming out of the
Yep.
speakers to the entire neighborhood. So they'll still have, it's kind of a good balance.
Right.
And then the very last suggestion was to incorporate back in the original policy at the very end, we talked about there being, if there was to be consideration to amend the policy, that there would be a folding in of the community to discuss and be a part of that conversation. So that had been removed as part of the streamlining process, but in looking at the feedback, it makes sense, and
Yeah.
it would happen. I think the important thing for the community to know is that any concern they have, they can bring forward to the board or to the administration, whether it's related to a policy or not, but even if it is related to a policy, that would kickstart that process to have that discussion.
I don't have a problem putting that in here because this policy because it affects the neighbors directly.
Yep.
Yes.
So I think engaging them, so first of all, thank you so much for the engagement with all the neighbors who are, I think that's great. But I wouldn't have a problem having something in there that said,
Right.
if we're going to revise it, we'll ask them again.
So now, after going through those, are there any additional comments or questions on what remains in the policy that we didn't actually touch on?
Just to go back to that point, so
Yeah.
number 15 in the marked up,
Yes.
in the initial policy is where it was related to having an advisory committee, and it talked about every 3 years. So the idea is
Yeah.
to leave it more broad, to say if,
Right.
if changes are to be implemented, that outreach will occur.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Modifying that original one to be more applicable to the times, but committing in the policy to consulting
Great.
with the neighbors as part of that process.
Okay, great. No, I just thank the policy committee and Jen, you as the chair of the committee for really, this again, I think is now maybe our third or our fourth time where we have had public come to the meetings, they've shared with us concerns, and then through the, process of the board meetings, we've been able to address concerns in a timely and respectable manner and way. And I think it's a great service that we're able to provide, that we do for the community, and I'm really glad to see that yet again we've been able to solve a concern that was brought to us, so thank you.
And it was crucial, and actually, I want to thank publicly the neighbors and the community members that came forward and sat down and talked through and gave their feedback, because without them, this process doesn't.
Yeah, we got
Doesn't work.
some great history and context from when this first came about, so we appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, so we will bring this back to Policy Committee to make those changes. And then we'll bring it back to the next board meeting as an updated
Right.
version.
Just a timing question related to thinking about kind of when our next meetings are, and when
Yep.
the seasons are starting and practices and such. Will it come back as for a discussion number 2, or will it be for a first read again?
I think it would come back as a discussion number 2, because we went
great.
through it
Approval.
fairly
Yep.
in detail now, and there doesn't seem to be any major concerns that we have to go back and research. So it's
Right.
an update, and we would have a second reading, and then it would be able to
Great. I
keep
think
moving in that
Yeah.
process.
wonderful. Great, thank you. Okay, great. Moving on to communications to and from the board. So at this time, we would have our board members announce their intention to seek re-election. So at this time, both of our board members, unfortunately this evening, were unable to attend this evening's meeting, both Vivek Kamath and Tom Stein. This is the third year of their first term in a 3-year term, and so on May 16th will be time for election of new board trustees. So at this time, I will share with you the statements that they have provided to me, and then certainly I'm fairly confident that their next meeting's in attendance, that they themselves will want to say a few words to the community. So first, I will read Tom Stein's comment. In my 3 years on the board, I've had a front row seat to watch the Rye City School District administration deal with the challenges of COVID, significantly implement the infrastructure work that voters authorized, deal with a 100-year flood, and continue to improve and modernize our curriculum, all while consistently following the principles of the Rye Commitment. While I have seen much accomplished, there is much to be done, and I will continue to do my small part if the voters of Rye choose to elect me to another term. So Tom Stein is officially announcing his intention to re-seek election for a second term for the Board of Education. And now the statement from Vivek Kamath. I apologize that I am not in attendance this evening, but I would like to thank the District of Rye for the opportunity to serve on the Board of Education as a trustee for the past 3 years. It has been an honor to serve the community and have a front row seat to all the hard work of our superintendent, faculty, staff, and administration devote to maintaining such a highly regarded school district. I am proud to know that my daughter will benefit from all of the investments that the district has made into making the Rye Public Schools a high-performing school district at every level. Unfortunately, due to future work and personal commitments, I've decided not to run for a second term. I look forward to completing the rest of my term and supporting my fellow board members in ensuring we continue to advocate for policies and solutions that uphold the tenets of the Rye Commitment. Finally, I would like to thank my fellow board members for their dedication, professionalism, and commitment to the students and families of Rye. It's been great working with you over the last 3 years, and I look forward to supporting you in your roles as trustees in the years ahead. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing everyone at our next board meeting. Vivek, we thank you for your service. We certainly are not saying goodbye this evening, but we look forward to you coming back to see us at our next board meeting. And unfortunately, that does mean that at this time, Vivek has announced that he will not seek a second term for the Board of Education. So we will have one vacant seat, and we will have one incumbent seat for our May 16th election. And now, moving on to updates from board and district committees. It appears from my notes that Policy Committee is the only committee that met, and I believe we've had a robust update. Is there anything further from the Policy Committee?
We did review a couple of other policies as well.
You were quite busy.
Those will be forthcoming. We were able to actually review 3 policies that didn't have any changes, so those will just get an update. Those are mainly about, related to our business office. and procedures there, which are pretty prescribed. And then we are also taking a look at our student privacy policy, which will be coming up on our next, probably on our next agenda, I think, or maybe the following one. Probably the following one.
Just as a point of information, the Facilities Committee was supposed to meet, however, given the weather that we had 2 weeks ago, that meeting was called off and rescheduled, so we will be meeting next week, and we'll be certain to bring that information forward at the next board meeting. Is there anything else for communications to and from the board? Okay, seeing none, we will take a vote to adjourn. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Chris Repetto, seconded by Jen Boyle. All those in favor? That's 5-0 with 2 absences. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you on April 11th at the Board of Education meeting, where we will get a literacy update. So we look forward to that. And in the meantime, have a wonderful spring break, and we'll see you all when we get back. Have a good night.